experts here with me. Jeremy Saland, let me start with you. Criminal defense attorney, a former Manhattan prosecutor. So as I said, you've been in these rooms. So Rona Graff confirms 2 contacts she maintained for Donald Trump were Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. And that Stormy had been to the office and there was discussion about her being in The Apprentice, which Stormy herself has just said in that documentary clip I played. Did she give the prosecution what they needed from her?
She certainly did, and she did it unwillingly under subpoena. I wouldn't measure her in terms of quantity, I'd measure her in terms of quality, meaning it was short, but it had value. That value corroborates David Pecker. While there's no agreement, for example, there's no emails, for example, understanding how there's a separation, but yet there is obvious communication, puts Stormy Daniels there. It absolutely establishes that foundation that is necessary to move it forward. So very basically, if David Pecker is kind of, I'll use the term, the bread of that sandwich, you know you're gonna get Michael Cohen, who's gonna be the bulk in that middle, but it's all that other pieces, all that puts it together to make it one story that works and sells and is accurate. They all corroborate each other.
Exactly, and as I said, it doesn't, whether Trump did or did not have a liaison with Stormy Daniels may not be relevant to the case, but it is relevant perhaps to how the jury perceives whether he was wronged and paying him. I mean, it's important, and this goes towards that. Bernarda, also criminal defense attorney, former New York prosecutor, did Rona deliver what you think that she needed, even considering she did not want to be there, she was not friendly?
It was clear to me that she wasn't cooperative, that she did not want to be there, because you know this woman, having worked for Donald Trump for 34 years, she knows the good. She knows the good and the bad of Donald Trump. So she wasn't really wanting to cooperate with the prosecution. But I think, as Jeremy said, the primary goal of getting from her was, 1, no emails, and number 2, that Stormy Daniels had been in that building. Because now Donald Trump cannot deny that he does not know Stormy Daniels, because you have a confidant, someone that is close to you, someone that you trust, and someone who's reliable and credible before this jury, because she doesn't have an axe to grind, saying that she saw Stormy Daniels inside of that building on the 26th floor where you reside.
Right, exactly, and maintaining those contacts. I mean, you know, those are black and white facts. Now, Jeremy, when you're in the room today, the defense was not given a witness list in advance.
Right.
All right, so they don't know who's coming when. And I'm sure he's sitting there dreading the day of Karen McDougal and cheering for when Michael Cohen walks out there. But nonetheless, what was his reaction when Rona Graff comes out and takes the stand?
Yeah, you know, this was our 4th day of David Pecker's testimony, and from the start, Trump seemed not interested. He was zoned out, I think, for most of it. You know, it was a lot of rehash. And when they called Rona, he perked up. He stood up, he sat up in his chair, he turned toward her, he was actually watching her testimony, unlike with David Pecker. And when his lawyer, Susan Nicholas, started questioning him, he really started paying attention, because she started with questions, what did you think of him as a boss? You know, and she said good things to say about him. She worked with him for 34 years. And, you know, his lawyer, she asked, did he respect your intelligence? And when she said, I don't think I would have been there for 34 years if she hadn't, that was like the one time today where Trump actually cracked a smile in court and seemed to be enjoying Rona's testimony. So it was a brief moment, but it was, I think, you know, actually a positive witness for him, at least.
He saw it that way. Was there any reaction in some of these moments that we're talking about when it's Stormy Daniels was in Trump Tower? Any reaction from him?
You know, there wasn't. And I think it will be interesting to see as this trial goes on and we get to the Karen McDougals and the Stormy Daniels, if that continues to be the case. But so far in this first week of testimony, he has not reacted when they brought this salacious stuff up.
All right. Well, so Stu, meanwhile, David Pecker, 4 days, as part of 4 days, finishes his testimony. And obviously, you've known him for decades. So the last question asked of David Pecker today was, does David Pecker believe that Donald Trump cares about his family? Right? And there have been a lot of questions about why Trump would do these things. Was it to protect his family? Or as Pecker said, was it for the campaign? But the last question, does Trump care about his family? Pecker replies, quote, of course I do think that Trump cares about his family. That surprised you?
Very much so, because Trump thinks about Trump. And his family, clearly, throughout all of this, has almost been window dressing, just so it makes him look like he's a family guy. But his focus has always been, what's best for me? That's why he picks the people he works with, and that's why he's been doing what he's doing with the power play. So the family, for a politician, obviously, it's a necessary optic to have. But his feeling towards them, no, they're just tools for him to advance his own cause.
And so that moment surprised you. I mean, Bernardo, at the end of the testimony of David Pecker, and I guess it's in a sense it's hard to put it together, and it's probably hard for the jury too, right? Because it happened over 4 days, and there was a day off in between. I mean, this was a complicated. It's not as if he just sat there from start to finish. And then, we all learned that you don't just do direct and then cross, you then do redirect and recross. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this thing isn't 6 weeks, it's going to be 16. But that's another thing. Who did David Pecker help more?
David Pecker definitely helped the prosecution out more because David Pecker laid out the foundation. He gave us the background information, and he also changed the narrative. This is not just hush money case. We're talking about the purpose of this money, of killing these stories, was to help this campaign. And you're hearing it from someone that I think was relatable to this jury. I think the jury's going to find him credible, find him believable. So even though he was engaging in these catch and kill schemes and, when we go into the supermarket, we used to see the National Enquirer be like, oh my God. And now we know how that gets to be the front page of the paper. You got the information that this is exactly how it worked out when it came to Donald Trump and when it came to Michael Cohen. And this is something that I think the jury, in plain terms, are able to digest. In the end, they don't know how to apply this information, but shortly after closing arguments, and they'll ask for readback to get more of his testimony read back, they'll be able to put it all together.
So, Jeremy, when you were, what else stood out to you? You're talking about the difference that you noticed in Trump's demeanor when Rona Graff was testifying as opposed to David Pecker. Was there anything else you noticed? Well, maybe about the jury and their reaction to that.
And I think the last witness we had, Rona had some interesting testimony. She talked about Trump. She talked about Stormy Daniels. And then we went to a banker. And I think then the atmosphere in the room, it dropped another level.
This was Friday at 5 o'clock?
Friday. It wasn't
You're
quite
putting a banker up here?
It was 3 o'clock, but
okay,
it was
court
close
time.
enough. Exactly. And so that's where this trial is headed, at least it seems for the next couple of days. The banker, he talked about very mundane regulations, and eventually we got to how he had opened Michael Cohen's bank account, but they were laying the foundation. This is at its heart, it's a documents case. It's got a lot of salacious deals around it, but the prosecution is going to have to take those steps. And so with the jury and with Trump, we're going to see a lot of downtime in the mix with Michael Cohen and Stormy.
Right, you got to mix in a little of the salacious, sex part of the story, right, Jeremy, and then put in what it's about. So to that point, Guy Farrow, the banker, Michael Cohen calls this guy days before the election, sets up this two LLCs, and uses one of them to pay Stormy Daniels. And the context of the date, of course, is right after that Access Hollywood tape, which is anyone forget. I mean, remember that was when Chris Christie refused to go on a Sunday show and defend Donald Trump, right? This was a campaign in complete free fall at that moment, and this is establishing what the campaign did.
And we've said this 1,000 times, and I know you would agree with me. You don't leave common sense at the courthouse footsteps. You go in, the jury takes that with them, and you're following not the quantity, you're following the quality of that evidence. So now we have Rona Graff, who's giving you the presence, corroborating how things were done in terms of no emails, and setting that foundation. Now you have the banker who says, here are the fake account, well, not fake accounts, but here are the shell companies to move the money to make the payment. It's piece by piece by piece. You can't do this just on the shoulders of Michael Cohen. It dies on the shoulders of Michael Cohen.
Right.
You need everything else around him to lift him up. Otherwise, there is no case.
Right. You can't have it on. And I know he has long felt that they were going to do that, and that he would say it, but then they would prove it separately from Michael Cohen
to the side. He's critical, but you got everything around him.
And Stu, one thing that, as David Pecker's now walked off the stand, men that had been friends, again, we put that in quotes, but friends such that they were friends over decades, they have not spoken since the beginning of 2019, according to Pecker's testimony. So do you think they'll ever speak again? I mean, Trump has said nice things about him this week.
If you look at how once Pecker told his tale that he was required to, he also tried to make friends with Trump again. So more like from The Godfather, it's personal, not business. And this is kind of that relationship anyway, so it's a pretty apt description.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all very much.